and that sort of thing. So I had the great honor of being here and being directed by Gil and Shakespeare and a couple other things, and it just, well, I'm sure we'll probably get into that, but the reason that I'm an artist today is really from the influence of Gil, so I really can appreciate the fact that we get to share this stage and say publicly how grateful I am for, you know, all the things that you've, you know, instilled in me here and beyond. You know, we've communicated many times after graduation, and sage advice on all fronts. So how do you get, I guess, from where you are where I was to maybe where I am now? First of all, two main things to keep in mind. First of all, it takes really a high level of concentration, a zero, you know, margin of error on your focus. If there is something that you want, that you believe that God has called you to, then you cannot be dissuaded from that. You can't deviate from that. You have to have that singular focus and push through, even in the, what I would say, the absence of God. And I can tell you kind of about that later at another time if it comes back up. You're welcome to grab me or something. But there are many times where it feels as if you serve an absentee God on the journey. But you have to be confident in the calling that God has placed in front of you. And it is a windy little road to get there many times. And then I would say be open to the will of God. There are many times I went to work, I was telling this story earlier, that many times I take a gig because there's a paycheck in it, and it puts food on the table for me and my family. And that's the end result of that. But there are other times where, you know, an offhanded comment or connection leads to something different. And there are many of those little moments, you know, along the path that I can share with you where I was just doing a favor. I was just doing this, and it ended up being something that paid, you know, dividends at the back end of how to get to where I am currently. So that's in general how I got from there to here.
A specific example that I was very excited about, because your wife is an alumna, Michelle, of our program as well.
Yes, and she's sitting right there.
All right, Michelle, you got to wait. Michelle's involved in a lot of things in Charlotte, and she's a producer herself and a writer, screenwriter. You were in a meeting with the executive producer of this, eventually became, of this Broadway show, Hands on Hard Body. But you were promoting her wonderful show and project about Grace Kelly. Tell us that moment. Give us that moment when you were talking with him and he says to you, no.
Yeah.
That's an illustration of what you're talking about.
It is, you know, it's crazy. And Michelle happened to be in the office when this happened. But I'll give you a little bit of backstory. You know, first of all, I know exactly what God has planned for me. And so when, you know, we read the Bible, I think we were talking about this earlier, we read the Bible and everything happens in compressed time, regardless of the story. I mean, if it's a novel or if it's the Bible, or all of these great moments of faith in the Bible happen in compressed time. So we turn a page and they're delivered from the lion's den, or they're delivered from the fire, or they're resurrected from the dead. You know, those happen with the turn of a page. And so there's this idea that if God calls you to something, on the next page you get it. Right. And that is not the case at all. And so I guess this would have been 3 years ago at this point. Michelle was writing a new musical about Grace Kelly, a very specific moment in her life, the events around her engagement and ultimate wedding ceremony to Prince Regent. And so that was going to be, according to my plan, that was going to be my first commercial venture. This was a product that I thought needed to be on the commercial stage, that would play not just, you know, on Broadway, but in territories around the world. And so I saw that as the first one. This was what God wanted me to do. And so we set out on a what we called a behind the curtain tour, which is essentially a presentation that you make to individuals who have the capacity to invest in a very high-risk venture that would be rich people. And, you know, we tell a compelling story as to why this show exists and how we're going to raise money. So we were headed out to San Diego to, you know, to make a presentation to a group of people, and a friend of a friend introduced us to a gentleman by the name of Ralph Bryan, who was chairman of the board for the La Jolla holiday house. They had named a Ralph Bryan Day in La Jolla for him. And more than anything else, he is a very successful Broadway producer. He has Tonys and all kinds of platinum albums, Jersey Boys, Memphis, American Idiot. I mean, the list of shows that he is involved in go on and on and on. So he was gracious enough to allow Michelle and I to meet with him in his office in La Jolla. So this is as far away from Broadway as you could possibly get. We're on the West Coast, literally. Look out his window and there's the Pacific Ocean. Coincidentally, that day, the Tony Award had arrived. If you didn't know, you do the Tony Award ceremony and then the actual award ship later. And the Tony Award itself, the trophy, had arrived, and he had just pulled it out of the box as I sat down. And I said, can I hold this? Because I'm like, this is the goal, right? Right? And he goes, sure, yeah. Well, yeah, it's blasé to him, right? I mean, I'll just put it on the shelf with all the others. And so I'm sitting there and I'm holding what I've always aspired to hold. It's not mine, but it represents what it can be. And so we're having this conversation, and I'm pitching to him, Michelle and I are pitching to him By Grace, this musical about Grace Kelly. And essentially, I'm holding what I want, and hearing him say, no, I'm not interested in your show. And this is the guy who, if he had just said yes, you know, these moments happen all the time. You talk to the billionaire, and if you just say yes, the show would be on the stage in 12 months. If you would just say yes, you know, and I lament to Michelle sometimes, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. They stand off to the side and they go, I knew that show wasn't going to go anywhere, but it's not going anywhere because you didn't write me a check. I'm at the end of the financial line here. But so there's this real dichotomy of me holding this Tony and hearing him say no, and leaving that meeting thinking, you know what, this has been another closed door. And at this point in the story, if you were to hear the whole story, this would have been many, many closed doors. And I'm often reminded of a moment in the Chronicles of Narnia. I believe it's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It could be any number one of them, where they are speaking of Aslan, and they say to him, or they say about him, he is not a tame lion. And it strikes me at that moment that I'm holding this Tony and hearing this guy say no, that I don't know how to control this God. That, you know, in many respects is the person that you've committed, at least for me, my entire life. There was never a moment. I was raised in the church, born in, you know, Southern Baptist, know the Bible, do the quiet times, lived a very good life, didn't party or any of those things. I was 21 until I had the first drink, as you know, we're Baptist. And, you know, all of this stuff. So there were parts at times, like right after that moment, where I go, you treat the Bible like an instruction manual, right? Okay, if I do this, this, and this, at the end of it, I should have put together whatever, you know, the IKEA package says, right? This is my IKEA Christianity. If I just read and follow the instructions and I put this A bolt into that B bolt and I follow John and Matthew and Mark and what all the teachings of Paul, then God must be obligated to do this for me. But he's incorrigible. He does not do what you want him to do at any time. And so, to bring it full circle, I'm holding that and hearing him say no, but what that meeting did do was whatever magic, whatever intervention, whatever method that God uses, he created, in that moment, a friendship that is pushing 3 or 4 years now between Ralph and me, and has become, you know, each stage of my life I've had strong mentors. I've been very fortunate in that respect. College, here at Regent, and then now in my career, this Ralph Bryan has taken some sort of interest in what I'm about. And ultimately, By Grace was apparently not the first show I was going to put up on Broadway, as hard a pill as that has been to swallow. But at a certain point, you know, he calls me up. I've got a show that's opening La Jolla next week. Why don't you come out and see it? Because I think this would be a show you'd want to do. Out I go, out in April. While I'm out there, I'm going to meet with a few other investors. This was a guy who was funding Christian films. And the number of people that God has allowed me to meet and talk to is a whole other story unto itself. But I was out there, and he sang no to By Grace, but just in general, because that's it's a musical and not a film, and he's really into film, Christian film, and I couldn't budge him. And I could talk forever about how I think my musical's going to have a greater exposure worldwide than any of those small Christian independent films are going to have. But that's not his deal, so that's all right. But while I'm out there, I get to see a preview of Hands on a Hard Body, and I look at that play and I go, this is a play, one, that is just a musical that is really, really good, but two, is the most authentic storytelling, the most legitimate presentation of the gospel, and I can only say that in this room, that a musical has ever made. And we're talking Jesus Christ Superstar, Sister Act, Godspell. All of these shows we're currently playing on Broadway at the time I'm watching this, but this show tells the story of my life, of your life together, and that's why I got involved. And so to the point, sometimes God, again, He's not this tame lion. 2 years I've been working on getting By Grace funded. I can't get any traction, although currently there's some traction, but that's neither here nor there. I can't get any traction. 3 months I get Hands on a Hard Body funded.
Well, God may be using this opening to facilitate access to funding for By Grace.
I'm quite confident of that.
Aren't we going to believe God for Michelle? And for
Amen.
us,
Yes.
that By Grace is going to be produced, and we're going to go to the opening night.
Absolutely. Bring it.
Yes. By Grace, Michelle, that's a beautiful website, a wonderful website. I hope everybody goes to that.
Yeah, check it out.
Yes. You talk to us a little bit. Say that again.
ByGraceThemusical.com. All one word, no slashes.
All right.